category. I mean, these are primarily, from that point of view, artists. They're not scientists per se, but they're still tapping into something. And do you think, how should I put this? Do you think that this knowledge about this stuff is want to get out, to be known in that sense, or is this just random, floating around everywhere, and people will pick up on these ideas and put them out there in whatever way or fashion? Some people call this tapping into the muse, or I would guess you'd say the daemon then, of course. But
yes.
What's your take on it?
We have discussed this long and hard on the forum and on the blog site as to whether is this because the daemons, the daemons of each individual, now feel it is time to be known. For instance, if we have had this daemonic element to ourselves ever since we evolved, or ever since, if you take the theories of Julian Jaynes, I don't know if you've come across Jaynes's work on the bicameral mind.
Absolutely, very interesting.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Okay, you might be interested in an aside here. Julian Jaynes, when he wrote the book back in 1976, took the manuscript to another of his lecturers at Princeton, a guy called Professor David Loy. And David was the person who first read the manuscript of the bicameral mind and turned round to Julian and said, you really need to get this published. And David helped him get it published. I had an email from David Loy about 3 or 4 months ago, having read The Daemon. And he said, your book is as potentially explosive and as potentially powerful as Julian Jaynes' bicameral mind. And in fact, he had a copy of my book sent to Professor Ervin Laszlo in Italy, because he said this book is of profound importance. So, there are lots of people now sort of really twigging into this theory. But going back, it's the idea of whether the daemons want to be known or not. And I really don't know, but I suspect that the very fact that things are happening the way they are, that yes, they are. And I just wonder it's because whether they feel that society, for whatever reason, we're reaching a crisis. And maybe collectively every single daemon on the planet is screaming out now and saying, if we don't do something soon, Armageddon is going to happen again. And we have to do something. Maybe that's what 2012 is all about. And because all the daemons, your daemon, my daemon, everybody else's daemon, if there is a conflagration around 2012, we're all going to die. Which means that all those daemons know that's going to happen. And there's this desperate, we have to get this message out now to stop this happening. I don't know. It's the first time I've ever said that on a radio program, but it's a possibility.
Do you think that we are, I mean, in that sense, are we the daemons, or are we just a tool for them? What would you say is their interest in regards to saving this environment? Is that because, as you said, we are intricately connected here, meaning that if we go, they go?
Yeah, the daemon is you. You are your daemon.
Right.
The daemon is your, for want of a better term, the Gnostics, and again coming into Gnosticism now. But Gnostics, the schismatic Christian sect of Gnostics in the 2nd and 3rd century AD, believed that the universe we live in has been created by a false god, which they call the demiurge. It was their way of explaining evil, because they worked under the logic that if there is a good God, how can evil be tolerated? Right. And they decided that what had happened was that another God had taken over and built this universe, but he got it wrong. And there is a universe behind this universe called the pleroma. And within the pleroma is the real God and the real world. And we live in this illusion. And part of us, the spark, knows that, and that, I would argue, is the daemon, and that's what the Gnostics believed was the daemon. And this is what William Blake believed. It nicely comes back to William Blake, because William Blake was a Gnostic, and Blake believed the same kind of idea. And Philip K. Dick was a Gnostic. You read all of Philip K. Dick's novels. He was preoccupied with the idea of illusion, that reality is an illusion. I mean, particularly, you read some of his later novels. I mean, Valis, for instance, the whole thing is we're still living in the Roman Empire as far as Dick was concerned. And that he was convinced of that. He wrote it as a fiction. The character Horselover Fat in Valis. Have you noticed anything about the name of the character?
Oh, I remember this. This is what was it? It was something with the translation of horse lover fat that becomes Philip K. Dick or something like that, right?
Yeah, horse lover is Phil in Greek is Phil hippus.
Yes.
Is to love horses, and Dick is German for fat.
There you go.
So horse lover fat is Philip K. Dick.
Yes.
But also in the novel is a character called Philip K. Dick, who's a science fiction novelist. That was Dick. And horse lover fat is his daemon.
Ah.
So he's writing about the Damon Eidolon diet again.
Yes.
But effectively, coming back to Gnosticism, so they believe that there is a part of you that is part of the pleroma, part of the universe behind the universe. And indeed, I argue in my first book that this is the secret of the Cathars. I also argue that this is probably what the real Holy Grail is. Forget the Holy Grail being the bloodline of Christ. Forget the Holy Grail being the idea of the chalice that held the blood of Christ. I argue that the Cathars, who were the people who carried this through, were a Gnostic religious group. And I think the Holy Grail is this duality thing that I deal with now. And I believe that's the secret. And that's why the Cathars died for it. Because if you look into what happened to the Cathars, they believe the same things I'm suggesting.
No, to just for a little while turn this towards the the more darker aspect to this. This is also knowledge. Then, if you have this knowledge, you can use this in order to actually manipulate reality for those who are not aware of it, right? Or for those who don't know how this stuff works. Do you think that has been done, is being done, could be done in the future?
That's a possibility, but then we have the interesting aside, though, that if you and I are living in our own Everett universes, this is your universe. In other words, we're communicating effectively in different universes. So therefore, anything that happens within your universe is part of your world, if that makes any sense.
Yes,
so therefore,
yes.
How you manipulate your world is up to you. It's still populated by real people, because I never want to fall into the trap which is called solipsism, which is the idea that other people are illusions. They're not, they're real. It's just we're all overlapping like this eternal golden braid of life. But effectively, there could be people that might be manipulating in certain ways. And I wonder, for instance, with DMT, with bad trips on DMT, bad trips with ketamine, which is another substance that I discuss in my books. Could this be that, because I don't even argue that necessarily daemons are good. There could be bad daemons,
sure.
What I call a cacodemon. Effectively Hitler's daemon ensured he survived, didn't it? With the Stauffenberg bomb plot, Hitler's daemon or somebody allowed Hitler to kick the bomb behind the pillar, and he survived. So clearly, within that universe, that was bad news for an awful lot of people. Of course, there could be the counter-argument to say that only happened in our version of history. Because, in Philip K. Dick's book, The Man in the High Castle, he suggests an alternate history where America was defeated by Japan during the war. And this guy's living in this alternate history. But this, again, is my theory. There are alternate histories, and we can exist within alternate histories as well.
And can we interact or change history depending on where we decide to be at what time? If we talk about this idea that we're kind of jumping back and forth into timelines or whatever, meaning that we can possibly experience or interact or change history, which would obviously change the present, right?
Well, that's the interesting thing with the argument of if you go back in time, it's the grandfather paradox, isn't it? The idea, if I go back in time and I kill my grandfather, I will not exist. Therefore, I can't go back in time to kill my grandfather. This is why people posit the idea of the ever at many worlds interpretation. Because, of course, you go back and you kill your grandfather and you make the universe split into a different version of itself, but the version that you existed in still exists. So therefore, you still exist.
Right.
Because, funnily enough, the whole argument of Everett's many worlds has an interesting side, is that it's something called the cosmological anthropic principle. And this is something that has fascinated me for a long time, is that if there's only ever been one universe, the universe was hardwired for the evolution of intelligent life as we know it from the first few moments of the Big Bang. Now, people will argue and say, oh, that's just the idea that you're looking back. And of course, if you didn't exist, you wouldn't be looking back. But you look back to the first few moments of the Big Bang, so many things happened that had to happen so that life evolved, any form of life. So it means that the universe got everything right first time. Unless there are thousands and trillions of universes, in which case we're just the one that got it right, which is an interesting aside. But it means, again, here's again evidence of the idea that there probably are multiverses.
Or what about the idea that there is only one, but it's constantly readjusting and changing itself on a... I know that Jim Elwidge, for instance, talk about this thing about the clock cycle, if you will, of the universe, or that there's a specific speed at which, for something to move one increment or one distance, or I don't know how to term that properly, but the idea is that everything is constantly changing around in order to just, how should I put it, fit the periphery of the person who's observing it, or the awareness of that person. Could that be the case?
Yes, that could be as well. I mean, there is the idea. I mean, I think, again, that's almost the idea of collapsing the wave function. You an act of observation, you collapse it, and therefore you bring it into existence. You look away, it no longer exists there anymore, and you're changing it all the time by your acts of observation. I think there is what we need is a lot of creative thinking here, and of putting together people like Jim and myself and Rick Straussman, and there's lots of other guys around the world, of getting together and saying, hey guys, what have we actually got here? What are we really coming out with here? And then I'm sure there'll be a flash of inspiration, and we'll go, crumbs, that's it. We couldn't see it, but it's there. And that's why I'm so excited about. I mean, I have emailed Jim, and Jim and I have swapped emails, and it's again the idea of us all working together to make it happen, or do something. But I'm not sure what we're supposed to do yet. I'm waiting for the instructions from my daemon, I think.
Well, in one way, again, if we might be boring to go back to the Matrix analogy again, then.
Oh, not at all. Love the Matrix.
But in that sense, what they're doing there is that. They're overcoming the boundaries of that the constructed universe or world that they're living in because of their Neo's Thomas Anderson's belief of it, or he's overcoming the idea that this is a confined space that we're in, and it has certain rules, but actually you can overcome these rules. You can actually break free of them, and the only thing it takes is his belief that he can manage to do that. And ideas, for me at least, are like that. If you think it's possible, just look at human history, for instance. If everything that we've done and accomplished, if you will, so far has been done because of a thought or an idea about a car, or if we talk about technological advancement or scientific progress, whatever you want to term that, but it starts with an idea, and that's why the idea is the most important thing. And then afterwards we begin to unravel and put that into we manifest it, basically, if you know what I mean.
I think that's a very interesting point, in that another member of my blog site and my forum is a guy called Jake Horsley. And Jake wrote a wonderful book called The Matrix Being the One, which is unfortunately out of print, but I think you might be able to get copies of it. And Jake very much takes that viewpoint. I mean, Jake is very much part of my group in terms of the philosophy and ideas. And again, it's the message within The Matrix. The Matrix is an incredibly powerful movie. I have heard that, I know that the Wachowski brothers were the guys behind it, but I know that they very much acknowledged that Philip K. Dick was the main influence behind a lot of their writings. But the symbolism, it's sheer Gnosticism. The idea of the oracle, the concept of the oracle. I think the third movie lost it a little bit. But I have to say the first one was a stupendous piece of cinema. I think the other movie that has profound messages to it as well, because I love movies, I'll talk about movies for hours if you want, but the movie I think that really is very, very powerful in terms of the message of my book is Vanilla Sky.
Yeah, indeed.
And another one, I think, Jacob's Ladder. And Butterfly Effect.
Absolutely. I think Jake might be listening to this program, by the way, so we can say hi, Jim, as well.
All right.
But anyway, hi, Jake. But anyway, if we go back to the idea of precognition again, I know that you talked briefly, and maybe we can spend just a few minutes here before we begin to round up on this idea about how things seem to come to us in that sense from the future, upcoming events, big changing events, historical events like 9/11, things like this. You talked about this in one of your video presentations, that album cover by Coop, for instance, or whatever, where you have the Twin Towers, the image right there of when the Twin Towers explode, or